morning and good afternoon, everyone. Just now, you've watched a short video about our activities in 2019, and I hope that you get a good taste of what Swissnex China do. Now, welcome to our webinar, Evolving VC Landscape in China and Opportunities for Swiss Startup. My name is Li Junzhang. I'm Head of Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Swissnex. Swissnex China represents Swiss Science Consulate. We are active in China for more than 11 years to connect dots between Switzerland and China in education, research, and innovation. Today, we are honored to have three distinguished guests with us to share their views on Chinese VC attitude and appetite to foreign startups after serious impact from capital winter in China, US-China trade war, and the current outbreak of COVID-19. The challenges for startups and investors alike are real. We hope this kind of interaction help our Swiss startup get a good glimpse on fundraising in China and learn to tap into China's evolving innovation ecosystem. Before I hand over to our moderator to begin today's speech, I'd like to explain the format of today's webinar. We will have three presentations from speakers. Afterwards, online Q&A for our audience with speaker is highly welcomed and encouraged. Please type your questions at the Q&A button at the bottom side of the Zoom. Our moderator and speaker will try to answer as many questions as possible. The webinar will last 1 hour and end up at 10 a.m. in Swiss and 4 p.m. in China. Now, let me introduce you our moderator, Jordi Montserrat, co-founder and managing partner at Venturelab. We have worked closely with Jordi and his team to run Venture Leaders China for 6 years to have dozens of Swiss startups get access to Chinese market. The floor is yours now, Jordi.
Thank you very much, Li Jun. It's a great pleasure to be here, joining you from Switzerland, of course, which is currently going on under the lockdown, as you probably all know. I mean, today the pandemic is touching Europe. And of course, we are now all looking at the same challenge. One of them is particularly hard touching all the startups that we have been building over this year. So it's my great pleasure to be with you, to be able to animate and to moderate this panel, joining our distinguished guests, Mr. Tang Hao, Mr. Chang, and Mr. Rajwinder Lehal, which I also thanks to be joining us today. So to start with, I will have a very brief introduction also about what we do here at Venturelab, and particularly to put it in the context of all the relationship we've been building over the past years with China, and already some of the success which we want to continue and see what is today happening in this evolving situation. I think there will be many opportunities. We've built a solid ground, you know, to continue the development of this relationship, and therefore seeing how we can, and I look forward to hearing how it is happening now in China. We were supposed to actually be there in June. Unfortunately, due to the conditions, we won't be there, but we are all set to come back. We've planned everything to be back in autumn. And in the meanwhile, let's make sure that we do the best as we do the best of this situation, and we do the best of these times that we are spending together. So maybe if we can move a little bit, I think the slides here, there are a couple of slides that I would like to share. I think the control is now with our guest. So the next slide, if you can push the next slides from Swissnex. Can you just put the next slide with Venturelab? Thank you very much. And I think some of our audience, I'm sure, knows us. But for those who don't know us, it's been over 15 years now that we've dedicated our efforts at building programs ranging from financing all the way to international roadshows, including training and including support and visibility through the top 100 startups for the best talents and the best startups in Switzerland, ranging from support from inceptions all the way to global scaling. Namely, with VentureKick, we invest typically 5 million per year at the very early stage. It's 30 million plus. We've invested over 700 projects that we have supported in the past 15 years, everything in the deep tech. You will see many in these startups in startup.ch, and the best ones are appearing every year in the voting by 100 experts in the top 100 startup. And we train them thanks to the support of InnoSwiss. And one particular programs which links us with China and the work we do with the Swissnex is typically venture leaders. And if I can have a quick next slide, the next slide will be maybe Swissnex, because I think you guys have the control. Here we go. Thank you very much. You have the presentation of the different locations we do now. We go in other locations as well in Africa, Brazil, but where we are right now really active is between United States and China, taking our startup teams, our best startups who have potential to grow, and having them meet with investors. And we've done this now for the past 15 years as well, particularly starting with Boston, San Francisco, and for the past 6 years, 7 years actually, we've now been coming to China with a team that has been roadshowing China, as well as coming to Hong Kong with the fintech team starting last year, and what we want to continue this year. So it has offered for us the opportunity to have many success stories with startups, Swiss startup onboarding the Chinese investors. We have one of them on this panel. We have the pleasure to have Raj Lehal, who is the founder, one of the co-founders of Cellestia, and Raj was one of our participants which connected. He will probably share his experience during this discussion. And we had several other investors and business partners joining on Swiss startups, which are today very active in this Sino-Swiss relationship. I had the pleasure last year to also participate to the Sino-Swiss Summit in the collaborations around the scientific and innovation affairs, and I saw the very big will and the very big, the strong relations which exist now for 70 years between Switzerland and China, which is now exactly the topic in this incredible moment, because we have to say it's the first time the world is facing such together a pandemic. How will this thing evolve, and how will particularly, of course, the investment landscape evolve towards the next in the next month? To talk about this, we have, as said, three distinguished speakers. I would like now to introduce the first one. Our three speakers will represent different facets of this financing component. We have Mr. Tang Hao, who is the Deputy General Manager of the Chang Development and the TusPark Innovation Research Institute. I think, Mr. Hao, you will introduce TusPark, but I think also you have a very, having a degree both from the US and from China, having worked at the development and the support ecosystem. I think you have a very broad view of what's happening, and you also have a soft landing program for international startup coming to China, so you can also see how all of this now is evolving, and what can be offered to international startups in China in the current context. So you will have, I think, the first role coming with the support ecosystem, the science park that can help the startups in different ways. That will be. Then we'll welcome Mr. Chang. I will introduce you later, but I think you will really bring our investors hat. And finally, the entrepreneur, the co-founder, Mr. Lehal, you will be the third to speak. So it's my pleasure to pass the word to Mr. Hao for this presentation of seeing how you can accelerate the fundraising and the market entry with the kind of platforms that are today available and active, I think, because you're back into full activity in China. Mr. Hao, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Jordi. So let's see now if I can have the control. Yeah. So it's a pleasure to be here to share with you some views and experience that we have done in terms of international startups who want to enter in China and doing the fundraising. And where's my control? Sorry, so I don't have the control of the screen. Hello? Oh, okay. Here
Mr.
Hello?
Tang, Mr. Tang,
Hello?
please
Yes?
accept the remote
Yes? Yeah,
control
yeah,
on
I'm
your
back.
side.
Sorry.
Yeah, please accept the remote control on your side, and then you can control. Thank you.
Yes, now I can control, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, first, sorry, looks like some delay here. First, I want to say, there's a huge amount of challenge for the international staff who want to enter in China, like cultures, like language, resources, or even the knowledge for business are totally different. And also for the international staffs, you need to know customer needs and the law and regulations. And in terms of fundraising in China, so we have encountered several international staffs who said, okay, we want to find money and in China, so we can start our venture. But usually we find them, if it's a challenge job, because some of them say, okay, we will find money in China, we will establish our business out of China. So in this case, I think most of them will fail. There are several reasons. First, in China, China government really have control for the outbound investment. So that will lead to the China investor very, very cautious for the investment they were made for the outbound investment. And secondly, actually, as far as I know, not many China local venture capitals, they have dollar or euro funds, especially for the early stage startups. And the third one, for the China venture capital, who usually invest in startups, they are also request, the teams to operate in China fully or partially, and for the consideration of risk management, and also they will feel more convenient to give support for the startups. So I was thinking, if you intend to raise money in China, it's better to operate also in China. It will be easier. And the next slide. Oh, I cannot move to the, okay. For the market entry, I think for the startups, also you need to know if your business is 2B or 2C, because they are totally different market channels. And also you need to make clear, you need to find proper business partners when we talk about market entries. So you cannot cover everything here in China. So a reliable business partner is always critical. And also you need to do some market adaptability. For example, we have met some foreign startups. Their products are perfect in their own market, home market. But they find when they put the products in China, so they are a totally different scenario in the market. So they need to make adaptations in order to suit the customer need here in China. So you need to reinvent, redefine your products sometimes. And also you need to understand your customer. Next. And here's some advice. So I would suggest that for the foreign startups, you make some market research before you take action. For example, you need to understand market capability, local competitor, and also your technology advantage. So those are very important. We often have met some international startups. They think, okay, we have really good products and we are very advanced in the technology. But when they come to China, they feel that there's a totally different. There's already market competitors there, and their technology is not that advantage compared to the China one. And the second thing is that I was thinking for the foreign startups, if you have a technology advantage, that will be much better for a model advantage. If you really have good technology, then it will be easier than a model advantage company to operate in China. And also, you need to know China business environment and knowledge and culture, and to find a reliable local partner, which will help you to, to modify your products, to develop the markets. And okay, I must move quick. So another is that China actually is bigger than Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. I was thinking probably for different stops, if you are coming from different industry, you can take fully advantage of the different cities will have different focus in different industry, and trying to also utilize the policies provided by the local China government. They will provide staff grants, loans, subsidies, and also pay attention to the new investment trend I mentioned for the new infrastructure construction that China governments were made in the future. So that will be 5G big data, ultra high voltage, transmission, intercity railway, and new energy, artificial intelligence, and industrial IoT. So there will be a trillion RMB investment in these areas. So if you are a company in these areas, I was thinking you will have huge opportunities in the future in China. Okay. And also you should also leverage the network of local famous incubator like TusPark. So the strength of this network will help you is so you will, it will help you to access to local company, your partner, your customer, supplier easily, and also help you to access to capitals. And will give you knowledge, know-hows, because they have a mentors network also. And also they will help you to connect to the services. And also the government incentives they will provide, and also take use of the advantage of scale. And you need to find the best place to start your business, because in the tier 2 or tier 3 cities, they may provide better beneficial policies for the staffs when you compare to Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, because there's more competitions there. Okay, only 1 minute. Okay. So there will be a very short introduction for TusPark. TusPark belongs to Tsinghua University. We have a network of more than 300 spots in China, almost all the tier 1, tier 2 cities. We have TusPark and Tus incubators. And we also operate in overseas like UK, we have TusPark, and in Italy, and in Silicon Valley. So you can easily access to TusPark probably in your country. And also we will bring you more easily to access to the cities in China. So we have been in these areas for more than 24 years. So we have successfully incubated more than 40 companies who went to IPO. And we have also a portfolio company in different areas. They are listed also in China stock market, in Hong Kong, NASDAQ. So we'll be happy to provide the support for you if you are interested in landing in China. I think it's the time. Li Jun, yeah. Let's move to the last page. And yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Hao. Thank you very much for this brief introduction And it is very good. There are already many questions coming on the Q&A, so I can only remind everyone, in case you don't know, that there is a Q&A tool into your Zoom, and that you can simply put all of your questions, and we will answer them either in writing or most probably during the Q&A session at the end. We will now have the 3 introductions, the next one by Mr. Chang and then by Mr. Lehal. So that's but put all of your questions and we'll make sure to answer. I think our panelists, I see the questions, and one of them being that can we have the slides at the end? This one I can probably answer, yes, we will put the slides online at the end on the Swissnex website. I think they will be available. So that's what we want to continue now. So thank you very much for this introduction about the support platform and where we can get support. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. David Chang. David, you are the Vice President of the Shanghai Blockchain Association. You are the CEO of Blocknology Digital Ventures. You are an investor, yes, in the digital, but you have a very good view of the investment landscape. Important to mention that you don't only come with this background, but also with a very strong background in corporate banking, particularly at JP Morgan, at BNP Paribas, just to mention those ones. You come in with a background in the computer science, so of course, but again, we had the pleasure to exchange already several times. What we look forward to hear is what will be this post-pandemic landscape, of course, particularly for international startup, particularly for Swiss startup. We also get questions about investments in African startups, investment in other type, which I think, of course, China, being very broad, has a very broad investment landscape, yet today, the discussion is mostly about the relation with the Swiss startups and the technologies and the scale-ups coming out of Switzerland. So, David, Mr. Chang, it's a pleasure having you. I can pass you the word right now for this discussion about the funding landscape, particularly for international startup in China.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you guys hear me? Thank you very much, Jordi, for hosting this session. Oh, switch to the next page. What? Yeah. Why it's switch? Okay, coming back to me. Thanks very much for Jordi for hosting this session, and thanks very much for Swissnex China for inviting me to share our views. When I was preparing for these slides a few days ago, I was thinking about talking about, in my mind, really are the 3 stages: the bad, the good, and the great. But obviously, in the past couple of days, you know, the world has changed quite a bit. I don't feel like I need to spend too much on the bad part. And I think, you know, everybody recognize, you know, this is a very challenging period. So I really want to focus a bit more on the good part and the great part. You know, why the slides is keep jumping back and forth. No, it's not my slides. It's next speaker's slides. Control. Okay, yeah. Here. There's a delay. Can I pass the control to the control center? Yes. Can you flip to the next page? The Swissnex control center, can you switch to the next page? Oops, it's not me. Next page. That's not me. Previous page. Sorry, the page bad. Can you switch to the page that's labeled bad, B-A-D? There's a page that's labeled bad, B-A-D, not this one. Not this one, the 2 pages before. it's switching back and forth between my next speaker and my last page. Can you switch to the page that's labeled BAD, B-A-D?
I'm really sorry for this. I'm jumping in, David, you hear me probably. I'm really sorry. We seem to have a small technical issue with the slides. I am just wondering right now, and please all attendees, bear with us. I think it's really a small technical glitch, like it happens once in a while. And maybe I think it might be an option to just give the control to David. Would you be able to put your slides on the screen, David? Would that be an option?
I'm on my iPad, so.
Okay, no worries. Then we'll find a solution. We'll find a solution. I see the Swissnex team is coming up, and we'll have the slides ready in a minute. Just give us a second that we can put your presentation on the screen and master these. And in the meanwhile, I will already use the opportunity just to pick up a question, I think, so we can already address this question. I will switch. David, give us a minute. We'll be back. But there is a question at Mr. Hao, which was already going there. So what I will do is just unmute Mr. Hao to answer what questions by the time. Normally it might be that your slides are not under control. Sorry, Mr. Hao, I was going to give you the word, but I'm told that basically we are back under control. David, can you just by yourself see if you can advance? It is just jumping because we gave you the control. I think it is simpler to the Swissnex team. I think it is simpler just to take this presentation individually and just to control it for Mr. Chang. So just give the thing. So I hear that, yes, wondering some people about Zoom. Normally it works very well. I have held several seminars around this and webinars, and it works extremely well. Once in a while it doesn't work, but we're happy to get more suggestions. Mr. Hao,
yes.
So there is a question about, it was very, and we've seen your slide. The slide is not coming back, but then I would like to just do the question to Mr. Hao in a minute. Now that we started, Mr. Hao, your presentation was on all the tools. Do you expect this to continue the same way in the sense of, do you expect that this scenario, what you presented now, will continue the same way in this post-COVID era? I mean, will the tools that you presented with the interest and the areas of interest and the support in the second-tier cities, will they continue to be the same as what you described during your presentation? We have a question from Mr. Romero, and I think that's one of the things that I would like to address. You know, what will be the concrete, if any, impact compared to what was business as usual for the support? Will you be more selective? Will there be other areas of interest? You know, how do you see the impact of this pandemic?
So this is a question for me. You know,
yes. On your presentation and how you were running to the supports until now, will there in the future, will there be an impact, or do you think you can go back to business as usual, if I may say?
You mean you know, in this sorry, I didn't hear you very clearly. Could you repeat it again? Sorry.
Sure. So the question is really about the situation. You know, in your presentation, it seemed it was somewhere the continuation of the business as usual in the future. But do you think, what will be the evolution? Do you think there will be changes in the supports as you describe them, and the sectors as you describe them in the post-pandemic period? You know, after now that we're all emerging, how do you see, will it have changed? I mean, I think your presentation was also very, very close to what was still already happening in China. Do you see changes coming out to this support? You know, what will be the impact of the COVID?
So, yes, yeah, I'm coming back. So really, we really see the impact for the startups in my incubator and science parks. You know, many startups are already suffering a lot for losing partners and the postponement of the contract. And we think, you know, there will be also challenges here, you know, for all the countries for the COVID coronavirus. So first, from the point of view of investments, I think the investor will be more cautious when they make the decision to invest the money to some projects. So we know in this, we call it winter, and somebody say, okay, the winter is come. So for the winters, we always say the cash is the king. So I think for the, we see they are also running out the bullet. I mean, it's the money. So they will be more cautious, and they will be more picky for the staffs, you know. So they will make very careful investigations. So maybe the terms for the investments will be even longer than before. But we do also see opportunities, you know, for some staffs. For example, if you are in medical, if you are in health areas, and there was definitely huge opportunities here, because you know the whole world is trying to figure out the way how could we defeat this virus, and also the China government from here, you know, the China government also give huge support for the staff. For example, the government is request the incubators like us to reduce the rent for the staffs in our incubators. So we give the deductions like 1 month or 2 months free of charge for the office. So you know, we are thinking all the ways to help, you know, the staffs to survive in current winter situation. Thank you, Jordi.
Thank you very much for bringing in. I mean, I think that's one of the place. There are more questions coming. I am jumping back to David. I'm really sorry, of course. Apparently, we have a challenge with the slides, so we'll do our best I want to give you actually the word. If you can do your presentations for the time being without the slides. And then we can please start, and if we get them fixed during the next minutes, I will try to put them back on the screen. But David, I will give you the floor. You will have to improvise. I mean, that's one of the I would say side effect of the pandemic. It happens also live. I had this. You have to work without slides just for this minute. Thank you, David. Please jump in. So we were starting at the bad. We had the time to see your slide just for a second. Go ahead. What's on the bad, the good, and the great?
Thank you, Jordi. Luckily, I had 2 months of preparing for this stress test, so I'm pretty prepared. So I can just talk and without the slides. You know, obviously, as I was saying that I spent a few days thinking about this presentation. I was trying to structure this in the 3 stages: bad and good and great. But obviously, world changed quite a bit. So I don't want to talk too much on the bad part, except one point where, I mean, we all realized that 3 months ago, 2 months ago, our priority of doing what we do now sitting here is dramatically changed. But from our perspective, I think our focus, mostly aligned with the national focus, will be 3. One is obviously digital economy, digital supply chain, and digital transformation. That's a major focus. That is now, and that was then. So that's pretty consistent. Second is obviously healthcare. Healthcare will be put on a much bigger focus. It was a focus, but now will be a much bigger focus, especially in antiviral, in vaccine technology that go into those. And I know the Swiss are the leader, are one of the leaders in the space, obviously. That's fairly encouraging. Last but not least will be sustainable development. And I think this is an area that will be receiving more focus and funding from government for sustainable business. And again, I think Swiss technology, Swiss experience are one of the leading players in the sustainable development. So to me, when I say bad, is a changing of focus, but I would say really it's not as bad for the Swiss startups when you guys are already one of the leaders in what I talk about in the 3 categories. So that's what I said, the bad. Good. I'm actually very encouraged by what's going to happen, which is already happening in China. I share some pictures today on my LinkedIn. In the past couple of months, while staying at home, I became fairly prolific on LinkedIn, try to share what's going on in China. Today, I talk about, I just had a meeting with our investment fund partners, with government officials, with industry partners, focusing on digital economy. Specifically, we focus on digital asset exchange in China and focusing on industry enterprise level internet solutions. So there are a lot of things happening. I mean, people here are not slowing down. We're not taking a pause. We're actually accelerating in China. But it is important when you want to capture this opportunity. I think we need to look at China in the following sense. Obviously now, private investors going to be looking a lot closer, working a lot closer with government investors. So if there are restrictions in the past where in your jurisdiction, that if you don't allow government funding or foreign international government funding to fund your enterprise, this could be a challenge, because private investors will, at least for the time being, as far as we can see, they like to work a lot closer with government funding. So potentially you will get a mixed pie of private and the public funding. So there's a little flexibility that you have to have in terms of receiving the local government fundings here in China, if that's a constraint. That's one. Second, it is important that to know that investors in China will be focusing a lot more in domestic market, in domestic consumer market, in the domestic enterprise market. So in the past, they might be willing to invest in a international startup like Swiss startup, where your first marketing strategy, go-to-market strategy might be in Europe. Now, I think the Chinese investor will be more curious about your go-to-market strategy in China. And they feel that obviously Chinese investors feel like they understand Chinese market much better. I would say that's a kind of risk-averse thinking for the time being, for as far as we can see. So you really have to be prepared when you come to China to raise funds to have a go-to-market strategy in China. That's second. Third, it is also important, I mean, I would say a kind of follow on the second point is, because it's a go-to-market strategy in China, it's also a kind of exit strategy for Chinese investors. Whether it's private investors or local investors, you really have to, they're thinking about how they're going to exit, i.e. who will be the acquirer of your company in China, or your technology in China. So there are really to us, there are really two different ecosystems here. There's a private unicorn ecosystem, Ali or Tencent, all the hundreds of unicorns, they all have their ecosystems. They're expanding and they're constantly looking to acquire. Obviously, in the current environment, they might slow down a little bit, but they still are looking to acquire. And there's also then the SOE, the stay-on enterprise tech ecosystem. We work with both of them, and the stay-on enterprise tech ecosystem are very large, and they are constantly acquiring new technologies to fit into their picture. So that's an important ecosystem that you have to look at it, because you really, when you step into China for the current environment, not only is the go-to-market strategy, and also how do you position yourself to potentially being acquired by the local, either the local unicorn ecosystem or the SOE ecosystem. And with these two points clearly articulated, and I think you can get a lot of enthusiastic interest from Chinese investors. So that's my good point. Good page on good. Last but not least, on great. Let me just share with you the meeting I had today, which is relevant to that last page. Talk about the enterprise level internet solutions. If you look at China in the past mostly 10 years, the Chinese internet economy is mostly a consumer transactional economy. It's dominated by Tencent and Alibaba. And that's the dominating force. And that's already being played out. I mean, that sector is very saturated and mature. What's missing is the enterprise level internet solutions. Now, interestingly, 5 years ago, in 2015, the central government actually released a lot of initiatives and plannings talk about enterprise level internet solutions. But you know what? People are so focused on the consumer transactional internet economy. They basically, the money, the interest, attention, all kind of ignored the government's planning on the enterprise side. So now, obviously, as the consumer and the transactional economy, internet economy is pretty saturated with government's focus, and now the private sector is focusing again on the enterprise side of the internet economy. So that's a great place if your technology, your startup is more internet, also enterprise solution focused. It will be great for you. And that's the first grade. Second, obviously, China, when it's looking at the next 10, 20 years of technology, it's important that we have to build the right technology, digital infrastructure for us to launch what we need. And another story for you is about Wuhan. Wuhan obviously is now so famous globally because of the virus. But interestingly, Wuhan, 2 years ago, I forgot, maybe 1 year, 2 years ago, Wuhan was ranked as one of the top smart city in China. Now you can laugh about it, but that tells you kind of the problem in the past 4 or 5 years as all the local governments try to catch on the smart city, digital city, and none of them did it in the right way. So through this epidemic, through this pandemic, basically all of those local city got a stress test. A lot of the weakness got exposed. So central government are looking at this issue and feel that they really need to replan or rezone, rejoin the digital infrastructure so that they have to really take back control of how the digital infrastructure will be built. And with that being built, the local government can build their local solutions on top of that digital infrastructure. So that is a great opportunity for global startups, especially for European startups, that if you're in the digital infrastructure space, is very great for you. That's second. Third, last but not least, which is great, is what I need to focus is digital economy. From every meeting I attend, the end of March, as we get back to normal work environment, the discussion, it's not discussion, is really the speed of government want to push digital economy. And there's a lot of conversation about digital asset, digital economy, how do we support all those? So we are superly excited about what's happening. Let me just summarize. So the three great areas that we think the global startups or Swiss startups should be focusing on, and you should be getting funding if you are focusing on that in China, is the digital infrastructure, is the digital economy.
David.
Yeah.
I am very sorry to interrupt. Just timing reasons. You know, it's my role as panelist to make sure I bring you to conclusion, and we'll have lots of time then later for the question and answer.
Okay. So yeah. So basically, that's all I want to say. So let me pass it to the moderator.
Great. And thank you, David. I mean, it was very insightful. I think you gave already a lot of insights of how the landscape, particularly the investment, the proximity with the state investments, the focus on the sectors. There are questions as well on the programs you mentioned about software that will come later. And so to all of our audience, again, we're sorry we had an issue which were something apparently with the slides. It happens, but I think the most important is actually sometimes I mean to say, even without slide, we then focus on the speaker, which makes it very strong. David, it was very rich. And also I have to say personally, because I think if we come this autumn, it will be great to see how this landscape evolve. And when we come with Swiss Startup to be ready for these changing conditions and how we have to prepare, particularly in terms of a market entry. I also picked up this material of really that the focus on being Chinese focused and not necessarily entering first Europe when we have these new conditions. But I think the landscape will continue to evolve, but that's the current status. And we also have the great pleasure now to welcome Raj. I think we can put the slides back. We welcome Raj Lehal. Raj, it's a great pleasure hearing you. I think we had the great pleasure to share the venture leaders China together. We did the roadshow during this venture leaders. You actually met some investors which joined on your round. So it's probably an experience that you will be able to share, bringing Chinese investor, but much more in much more as well to say. And maybe just a few words about you. I think you come actually from Canada. You have this very international. You studied at the University of Toronto. You moved to EPFL. You've been building Cellestia Biotech, which has raised to date close to 50 million, 49 actually, and an impressive team of executives in the life science. As said, you have now investors, global investors, including Chinese-based investors. So all of this experience really to be shared now with the startup. How do you manage this, and what do you see today? Probably you are in very close contact with your investors, and they are already giving you at least some of the insights in order to manage your way forward. So I think, Raj, that's the moment where I can pass you the floor. I thank you again for being with us. And I think the startups which are listening to us get a maximum of the experience for Raj. I know him personally. I know he has a lot to share. Raj, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jordi, and thank you, Swissnex, for the opportunity. So I will quickly try to share my experiences as a biotech startup from Switzerland. So let me just see if I can move the screen forward. Good, okay. So working. So briefly, a few words about Cellestia Biotech. Cellestia is a Swiss biotech spin-out from EPFL in Lausanne, based in Basel now, and we are developing a first-in-class innovative cancer drug. And since 2014, our inception, we have raised about 49 million Swiss francs, or close to 50 million US dollars. This is where the link comes in, and a big chunk of this money actually came from our Chinese investors and broadly from Asian investors. I'm gonna quickly tell you a bit some of the background about China and the role of China in biotech. So if you look at Chinese investments over time, it used to be a destination for foreign investment. Over the last couple of years, especially starting in 2014 or so, now there's a lot of more and more money, Chinese money is being invested abroad. And most of this money is going into developing economies in Africa, for example, as well as in the US and small part in Europe as well. The money is mostly is going for infrastructure projects in developing countries. But biotech also has a big role to play and is taking up a big chunk of that. So this is an example of how the money before 2018, the money was flowing out of China into US biotech industries, shown on the left side in billions. So the Chinese were making quite a lot of investments into biotech. But since Trump took over office in the US, there has been some restrictions on foreign direct investment into US-based high-tech companies. And with that, the investments for Chinese investment into US biotech has been going actually down since second half of 2018. So this is actually is really bad news for the US-based biotech companies, but it could be a good news for European biotech companies. It could be an opportunity for especially Switzerland, which is the hub of biotech in Europe, could be an opportunity for attracting Chinese investment. And why China is so much interested in investing into healthcare system? The answer is very obvious. China is actually, in China, there's an aging population, there's a huge medical need, there's a huge need for innovative drugs. China used to be manufacturer for genetic drugs in the past. That's not the case anymore. They wanted to develop and innovate innovative drugs for their own population. So if you look at last couple of years from 2016 till 19, now in China, there are a lot of drugs being approved. Those are developed in China. And also, if you look at the developing economies and the market potential for biotech and innovative medicine in China is huge compared to any other developing economy. So basically, in 2011, when the sales were about 66 billion, now they are in 2020, as we speak today, this is supposed to be in the range of about $175 billion. So this is a huge market potential to bring innovative drugs and to do business in healthcare in China. So what are we looking for? Especially my advice for Swiss startups is to really consider some of the key points that you have to keep in mind. Why are you interested in China? Are you interested in China to access Chinese market? This could be for clinical trial development, as China has been more and more integrated into global development for biopharmaceutical companies. You simply can't afford to ignore Chinese market, be it for development, for clinical trials, because you can use Chinese data now for approvals by foreign governments such as FDA in the US. Or you want to have access to China post approval of your drug. And this is, I think, there are a lot of companies, very good companies in China. They are becoming experts in innovative drugs. There are a lot of opportunities for our licensing there. And then we have noticed in Basel, for example, over the last 2 years, we see a lot and more Chinese companies coming over to Basel, Switzerland, looking for out licensing opportunities or in-licensing opportunities from their perspective. And some of them are even setting up the European headquarters in Switzerland. And the second part is, I think, which is most of the startup companies at the very early stage are interested in equity investment. How would you get this equity investment? This could be done by talking to VCs and as well as getting money from joint ventures. So I think just a few points on Chinese market, getting access to Chinese market. And also by way of having access to Chinese market, also financing your global development. You could actually, in a biotech especially, you could actually out-license, make a regional deal with a Chinese biopharmaceutical company. You will be able to raise money in terms of upfront payment as well as milestone payments. And this money can actually fuel your global development of your program. And there's also opportunity to, a lot of Chinese investors, the companies, they are interested in joint ventures. Joint ventures are a bit tricky situation to be in. There are a lot of challenges, cultural as well as administrative differences. They give rise to a lot of challenges. You have to be very careful when you get into a joint venture with a company. It has nothing to do with China. It's just when you're dealing with different culture or different way of doing business, linguistic differences, I think you just have to be careful about. So in terms of raising money from, sorry, I would like to go back. Okay, sorry. Okay, got it, sorry. Good. Okay, so in terms of raising money from Chinese VCs, I think the key things you have to keep in mind is a lot of VC funds, Chinese VC, there are two different funds, the VC firms. Those are focused especially investing in local businesses, local biotech companies, and their VC funds, VC firms, those have RMB as well as US dollar or foreign currency fund that can be invested abroad. So when you're talking to a Chinese VC, you're gonna have to, first thing you have to look for is ask them whether do they have an RMB fund only, which is only targeted for local investments, and these are difficult to invest outside China. Or they need to have ODI approval, which could be quite tricky, and there might be limitation on how much money they can get out of China to invest abroad. And the second part is if they have a US dollar fund or European fund, Euros fund, that money is really targeted for overseas investment. And this is something I think before you get into China looking for money, make sure you do your homework, make sure the fund you're speaking to are really in line with what you're looking for. Meaning, do they have US dollar fund if you're trying to get the money invested abroad? Or if the money is going to be invested into a local subsidiary, then it's a different story. The other thing is there are a lot of VC funds in the firms in China. You're gonna have to make sure that if you're a startup in biotech or pharma, you're striving to be a global business. There's no way you can be only Swiss business. There's no way you can only be focused on China. So you got to make sure that the team behind has credentials, such as there's really some big funds in China, as I mentioned, Vivo, Lilly Asia Ventures, and many others. And these funds, they have the teams behind these funds are really global teams. They have the deep pockets as well to finance your global businesses, and they can also help you to raise money through their own network. So it's very important to make sure the VC fund you're speaking to, if the money is intended to be invested in Switzerland, that they have a non-RMB fund. The VC firm that's behind has global reach, because you will need a lot of money in biotech to be able to bring your product to the market before we hit the market. I think the last point from my side is another interesting thing we noticed, which is very typical for Chinese VCs fund, is that their strategy is quite different than a typical European or US-based fund. Most of the time, the Chinese, since there's a huge need for innovative medicine in China, they have their own portfolio of companies. And almost always, they would like to see whether your company, whether a Swiss startup, for example, in biotech, example us, whether we can either out-license our product to one of their portfolio companies, or can we enter a joint venture with them. There's always, this thing is always there, that they would like to create synergy between their portfolio companies. And I think the advice from our perspective is that the equity investment should be kept different. Discussions for equity investment should be different than any joint venture or any out-licensing deal that you may have down the road. This should not be linked to each other, because you never know how things are going to go down the road. You may want to make a global deal, or you may want to make a regional deal with a big Chinese pharma at the end of the day. So, but this thing is almost always there. They will like to create a Chinese VC. They like to create synergy between their portfolio companies and see if they can move forward. So this is my experience of over the last 2-3 years being quite active in China. One of our friend and collaborator, he's online today, Charles Shed from Hong Kong. I think I will propose, if you guys want to talk to him, please do speak to him. I think one of the key challenges of a Swiss startup is navigating the Chinese business culture. And this is where you simply can't afford to go on your own and you think you can have a positive outcome out of that. This is where we had a huge support from Swissnex China. Liu Jun is online today. Venturelab, Venture Leaders. First time I went to China was with Jordi as part of Venture Leaders and Global Switzerland Global Enterprise. So these 3 or 4 entities, they are really active on the ground in China. They know the language, they understand the business culture, and I think that has been really, really helpful for us. If there are any Swiss entrepreneurs online today, I would propose to really make use of these guys. I mean, they're free and they are doing an amazing job. They fly you there, they set up the meetings for you, they do all the language, they all help you across all the linguistic barriers. So I think I have to say it's been a great fun, and it's been a great support that we got from Swissnex, and we continue getting this. We've been traveling to China at least 4 or 5 times a year, with the exception of last couple of months. We are planning to run a trial in China with the support of our Chinese investors. This is where the Chinese investors can also be very helpful. In a biotech company, when you're developing a global drug for a global market, you simply can't afford to ignore Chinese market. Nowadays, with the China is fully integrated into global development plan, you can use Chinese patient data for approvals by FDA. So as I said earlier, so there's no way you can afford to ignore Chinese biotech market and pharma market. And the only challenge is navigating those water. This is where I think the Swiss government, Swissnex is doing an amazing job. With this, I'm done. I'm happy to take any questions from the audience.
Thank you very much, Raj. I think it was also very insightful, and there are many questions, your experience, and what you see, particularly in the biotech sector. I think there is one question that I would like to take on behalf of the audience, and I also know that for the audience, we take your questions. You normally also, and I see chat, maybe if you want to raise your hand, I can take you live on answering some of the questions, but I would like to start on your third or fourth slide. You did have the discussion on how to enter the market, and you mentioned joint venture, versus other forms, and you also mentioned in the next stage that, of course, when you do joint ventures, you do have to be careful in how you set up these structures. So I think this question will probably go to you, and then I will like to bring David and Mr. Hao into the discussion, and to make sure that we have inputs. I know it's a recurring question for several participants. How do we come in, and what is it to look at when we do a joint venture into this market, particularly in the current times when investors, I think how will that evolve with having probably a stronger potential investor base that is coming state investment. So maybe Raj, do you want to take this and elaborate a little bit on this joint venture and the things you look particularly at to be sure that you're doing this properly?
Yeah, thank you, Jordi. So I think I can only give you perspective for a biotech company. Since you're developing a drug for a global market, you need a lot of cash, and this is something not easy to come by. So the difference between what do we do? So our preferred scenario is having an out-licensing deal to a big Chinese pharma. By way of this way, we can generate upfront payment as well as milestone payments. And the Chinese pharma company is much more equipped. They are much more, basically, they have all the resources on the ground to make it happen. The joint venture, but this way we just make a deal with them, they develop it, they basically bring it to market without our input. Of course, we have an input there, but we don't really actively operational on the ground. That actually relieve us a lot of scarce resources to focus on global development. So this is where we would like to focus on, basically US as well as Europe. And let the Chinese company that's well-known, that knows the landscape very well, let them do the job there. With a joint venture is not a preferred scenario for us, because then we will have to basically be part of every single step of the way in terms of financial commitment as well as committing resources, manpower as well, which is something as a small startup we simply can't afford to do it. So we prefer to simply out-license, make a regional deal with a reputable Chinese pharma that will do a development for us. And then what we would like to get out of this is be able to use the Chinese patient data for approvals in the US for global market. And this is a huge value. You simply cannot underestimate the value of the Chinese patient data for global approvals. That could save you millions.
Great, thank you very much. David, do you want to react as well on the same topic? I would like to just give you the word and have you just also, I think we heard about the biotech field. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the digital field. I will link it also to, of course, the software field. You mentioned there are special programs which are now supporting the software market. So that's probably a good opportunity to link both. Coming to the market, establishing a joint venture, what do you look at? How will you integrate these funds? And of course, how do you integrate the new supporting programs which are coming into this? David?
Yeah, thank you, Jordi. And I'll just share our experience before the pandemic, and I think it will be even more relevant pandemic, we focus on fintech, blockchain, digital assets, AI, and clean tech. So for this, obviously this portfolio of sectors, what we do is we look at, let's say, the Swiss startup, and we feel that that startup has the potential to get acquired by our the ecosystem that we are working with. So what we tend to do, our strategy is we will like to form a JV with that startup in China, and we provide all the funding for Chinese market, and the Swiss, for argument's sake, the Swiss company will provide technology and know-how and operating know-how. We provide funding and we provide market access and work with them, and hopefully to a stage that they can get acquired by the ecosystem that we're working with, whether it's the unicorn ecosystem or the fintech or the SOE ecosystem. So that's kind of been our experience, our practice in helping global startups coming to China, the go-to-market strategy for us, which we fully try to leverage our network of enterprise users. And we provide almost all the fundings for the JVs. So let me stop here.
So thank you for this. Maybe elaborating a little bit, because I saw there were quite a bit of questions. So and I'm going to continue with this probably with I would think Mr. Hao. There were quite a few questions around IP again, and when is the best moment to file IP if you're coming to the Chinese market, and typically if you're a foreign startup, and I think Raj, you can probably answer to that. If you're a foreign startup as well, but you are just selling in China, do you still need to do IP in China or not? I think this question is still there, despite the pandemic, things that have to be done properly. So what would you advise? Maybe Mr. Hao, can you jump in? And then I would like to pass the same question to Raj as to how did you best manage the IP, and particularly in relation to entering the Chinese market. Also, under the new conditions, I understood from David that of course the focus will be now very much into developing even first potentially the Chinese market. So maybe having more insights on these questions. Mr. Hao, do you want to take this first question about the management of intellectual property?
Okay, so I can share because I already answered by typing. They are asking me if they should register the IP before they come to China. I think this is really varied depending on what industry you are in. For example, if you are in an industry who are competing the speed, if you register the IP before your competitor, no matter in China or the world, and it will give you huge advantage, then you should do it immediately, no matter if you register the company before or not. But in other case, if you choose first have a Chinese company, then you can file IP in China. It also works, but compared to that, you will take some time. You will not that fast, but also it will give you some advantage. For example, you have an entity here in China, so your Chinese company can become the owner of the IP. And the government also, for example, in my city, in most of city in China, the government are incentive the companies to file IP. They will give you money for finding the IPs. So it will help you to reduce the costs for finding these IPs. I think for the industry like medicine, like Raj just mentioned, so they are competing on the speed, how fast the IP can file before your competitors, and it would be better to register, as soon as possible, no matter you have a Chinese company or not. So that's my answer. Thank
you very much, Raj. Can I ask you, do you want to complement?
Sure, I think it's absolutely clear if you're going to be establishing an entity in China, you wanted to have an IP there, and this will obviously be a requirement to have an establishment there and also be able to raise money from local governments, whether it's a state fund or VC funds. In our case, we are, again, as I mentioned earlier, we are a small company. We simply can't afford to have operations in China on our own, or even in the case of joint venture. So we are basically staying away from that discussion. And none of our VC investors have actually asked for our IP to be present in China, mostly because these VCs we are dealing with, they are global VCs, they have a global outreach. Their interest is in having an equity in a company, so having a share of a global development rather than just only China. Even though China is still, they're very much a focus, they would like to bring drugs to China for sure. But having said that, the IP question did come up with many other parties during the discussions to have an IP in China. Merely because of the size and the resources, we have not been engaged in. We haven't really thought seriously about bringing IP to China. If we were to one day establish an entity there, then I think the question is obviously yes, we will do it. But we are really focusing on art licensing, making a regional deal with the established pharma company who will take care of everything, so we don't need to worry about. Having said that, you need to have a patent in China for sure, which we do have. We have a granted patent in China that gives a safety network for our potential partner.
Great, thank you very much. There are many questions which are coming, and I would have loved to share. And I think that there are many questions also about the investment process. Maybe if you look, our panelists, if you still look at some of the questions, I hope you might be still able to answer. But I'm being told by the organization that we're running at the end of the time. We're supposed to conclude this. This webinar, which I hope was very useful, very insightful for all of our attendees. There are questions, and I think we will, Swissnex will make sure that we are in touch with the people who have left the questions, particularly when it comes to the trends in China. It's not the last webinar that we will have, so there will be more opportunities, maybe on more focused areas of business where the trends and the long-term investments are available, where the Swiss startups might have. I see also questions about what are the main difference between the Chinese and the European or the US investors, which are often questions we discuss, and that we might bring also for a next webinar in this discussion right here. It was to have a first, I would say, assessment of how is this VC landscape coming. And whereas I'm sorry, David, for the small, again, glitch with the slides, I think it was very insightful to see how the focus will be, how the market entry will be evolving, and also what Mr. Hao has been sharing about. Of course, when we're in this time, the cash becomes king, but there are still landing pads which are being done. You also mentioned going to second-tier cities where the programs are still running, and that people can be looking at opportunities. So as a wrap up in this role, I think I want to first thank you very much for having shared this experience with us, the three panelists for Swissnex China, to have organized this. And so we are, of course, looking forward to be able to travel. One of the questions that came up was, how are you today managing due diligence at a distance? Because meeting the people, visiting the premises has always been a core part of any due diligence. So that's one thing that we'll need to overcome. I think we have many tools that are digital and are allowing to do a first step. But of course, we probably expect that at some point, and David mentioned it, you are already coming back to a form of normal with meetings with people where you have much more freedom to act, and probably also this international travel will hopefully resume soon. Particularly, at least as said, for us, we are anticipating that we should be in China in October, in November, with the Swiss startup team coming and bringing startups in order to evolve. So that's really the goal of our next step. that will be my wrap up. A big thank you, a big step for forward. We are putting all of us seminars now as much and webinars actually as much as possible to organize or to share with the community. And this is only the first one. There will be more. Swissnex is organizing them at regular interval. I'm sure we'll have more infos about this in the weeks to come, and I look forward really to see you in person, but probably before that, see you again in virtual base. So thank you very much, and I will pass the word back to Li Jun to conclude.
A great appreciation to Jordi and also to our distinguished speakers, Tang Hao, David Chang, Dr. Raja Lisa. Thanks for your contribution and excellent input in today's webinar. Apologize for today's technical issues on David's slide. So due to a limited time, we are now close to the end of today's webinar. For audience, if you have more inquiries to Swissnex China or to specific speakers, please send the questions to the following email in info@swissnexchina.com and follow up on our social media as below. Lastly, a small ad on Sino-Swiss Business Innovation Competition in Chongqing on August. The winner can get 100,000 to 1 million euro investment. For more details, please check on their website, ssbicom.com. Thanks to our community for your engagement. Once again, many thanks to our speakers and moderator for your valuable engagement. Our next webinar ready for our Swiss startup. We are talking about Shenzhen innovation, the rise of China's Silicon Valley, a new frontier for Swiss startup. It will take place on 23rd April. Please save the date and stay tuned with us. Wish you all have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, Li Jun. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.